it's Esther. In this module, we're going to talk about how the Canadian government works. So we're going to cover topics like the system of government, how elections work, and the justice system, so that you understand these topics clearly for your test. In Lesson 1, we're going to start on page 28 of the Discover Canada Guide, where it says how Canadians govern themselves. Your guide says that there are 3 key facts to know about Canada's government. First, Canada is a federal state. Second, Canada is a parliamentary democracy. And third, Canada is a constitutional monarchy. Now, there's a lot of complex ideas and words in what I have just said. So we're going to go through that in a bit more detail now. So let's start with Canada is a federal state first. In Canada, we have a federal government that brings together different political communities with a common government for common purposes. The federal government also includes separate provincial or local levels of government that are more flexible and can meet the needs of each community. Canada has 3 main levels of government. First, the federal level. This level of government deals with areas of law listed in the Constitution Act of 1867. These laws generally affect the whole country. Some examples are defense, foreign policy, criminal law, and citizenship. Second, the provincial level and the territorial level. In each of the 10 provinces in Canada, the provincial government is responsible for areas listed in the Constitution Act of 1867 as well, such as education, healthcare, some natural resources, and road regulations. Sometimes, the provincial government shares responsibility with the federal government. Some examples where the federal and provincial government share responsibilities are immigration, the environment, and agriculture. The 3 territories have their own governments with responsibilities that are given to them by the federal government. The third level of government is the municipal level. This is the government we have for cities and towns. Municipal governments are responsible for areas such as libraries, parks, community water systems, local police, roadways, and parking. In all 3 levels of government, the Canadian people elect officials by voting. At the federal level, we elect MPs, or Members of Parliament. They represent us in Ottawa in the House of Commons. Each province and territory has its own legislative assembly where provincial and territorial laws are passed, and the names of those members change depending on where you live in Canada. In some provinces, like British Columbia, the provincial members are called Members of the Legislative Assembly, or MLAs. In Quebec, they're called Members of the National Assembly, or MNAs. In Ontario, they are Members of Provincial Parliament, or MPPs. And in Newfoundland and Labrador, they are Members of the House of Assembly, or MHAs. You should know your own provincial member and what they're called. The territories in Canada's north do not have the status of provinces, but their elected governments have many of the same responsibilities. Across Canada, there are also band councils which govern First Nations communities. These elected councils make major decisions that affect their local reserve communities, like housing, schools, and police. There are also Aboriginal organizations that represent First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people in their relationships with the 3 levels of government. Back on page 28 in your guide, we see the second key fact about Canada's system of government. Canada is a parliamentary democracy, And this really highlights the fact that Canada follows the democratic process of electing our members of Parliament. These members are responsible for passing laws, approving the money that the government spends, and making sure that it is spent correctly. I need to just take a minute here to explain the difference between the words parliament and government, because they're not the same thing. Parliament is the legislative or law-making part of a government, and it has three parts: the sovereign, the Senate, and the House of Commons. So for example, we say Parliament passed a bill. Okay? Now government has two meanings. Generally, government refers to the management or governing of a country. But specifically in Canada, the government consists of the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and the federal departments they manage. In the federal government, the Prime Minister is responsible for the operations and policies of the government. The Prime Minister selects cabinet ministers, who are members of Parliament, or MPs, who have a special role of leading government departments, like Citizenship, for example. The House of Commons is the place in Ottawa where the members of Parliament work for us, and we elect them every 4 years. Senators are appointed by the Governor-General with the advice of the Prime Minister. So they are not elected by the people of Canada, but they're chosen. The House of Commons and the Senate work together to review bills. Bills are proposals for new laws. No bill can become a law until it has been passed through both the House of Commons and Senate, and then given what is called royal assent by the Governor-General. We will look at this in more detail in the next lesson. The democracy part of parliamentary democracy is about us, the Canadian people. We participate in our government by voting in federal, provincial, and municipal elections. So it's always good to remember that voting is part of our responsibility as Canadian citizens. Finally, we need to look at the third key fact about Canada's system of government, and that is that Canada is a constitutional monarchy. A monarchy is a system of rule by a queen or king. Monarch is another word for queen or king. On page 29 of your guide, it says, as a constitutional monarchy, Canada's head of state is a hereditary sovereign. Remember, this is a king or a queen, who is in agreement with our Constitution and the Canadian rule of law. It is important for your test that you know there is an important difference between our head of state, who is the sovereign, and the head of government, who is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister directs how the government runs. The sovereign, as a king or queen of England, of course, does not live in Canada and does not run our government. So in Canada, we have the Governor-General of Canada, who is a Canadian that the Prime Minister appoints to represent the Queen or King in Canada. We choose a new Governor-General every 5 years. The sovereign is represented in provincial legislatures too, with a role that we call Lieutenant Governor. And please do notice that in Canada, we say lieutenant instead of the American way, which is lieutenant. Well, I think we've learned a lot in this lesson. I'm going to be reviewing some of what we learned here in the next lesson. So see you soon.